Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am Bond, and I am joined as always with my cohort Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
Doing real good.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear, bud. So it's a beautiful spring evening that we're recording this. It is the opening day of trout season. I tried to go out this morning and it didn't work out because the water was too high. Hopefully everyone out there that has seen flooding and rain this week is doing okay. Hopefully everyone's safe. But if you are safe and you are able to listen to this, we're glad you guys are joining us. Really, we had something on the docket for today that's been on our list for a long time. And that is the spring-heeled jack, which is something that comes up all the time in conversations when we talk about random Fortean happenings throughout the years. But before we get to that, Nick saw a movie, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Right? Yeah, this is your one for the season. So
I don't watch that many movies. And when I do, it's usually watching MST3K at the house.
Right. Yeah. I feel like for a lot of people, that's how they consume movies pre-1980.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's the theater around us is real nice. They are doing the right thing. They're addressing some things because, of course, it's so convenient at home. Right. Things are so, beyond the convenience, beyond the selection, televisions and the sound are just so much better today. And of course, people have gotten very comfortable at home. But the chairs are nice.
They are.
They are really nice. They're these reclining, you got foot room, the popcorn's good. Like, it's so convenient for us just to drive up to this theater, and it's not that pricey, I don't feel like.
No, when you're spending money on just like it's like an evening out kind of thing, yes, or a day out kind of thing. Like you're paying obviously for more than just watching the movie, but I think a lot of places do really well now with like making that whole experience. Like I know like Alamo Draft houses are great, and in some of the smaller, even like mom and pop, but smaller chains are kind of really catering to the experience.
And it's just nice to go out to do that and to make there's still something that's just really nice about dinner and a movie.
For sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of people of like any generation have fond memories of going to movies when, you're younger, especially. And it's something just is nice to keep going because there is something special about seeing a film on the big screen. I really like down in Dormont, we have the theater that shows 35 and 8 and stuff like that, and the big 60 mil stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh yeah, watching like we got to see Jaws down there, like an original copy of Jaws on a big screen years and years ago. It just hits different. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this new film.
Well, I'll tell you what, there was a couple movies that both of us were my wife and I went, it's her birthday and all. There were a couple movies we were both interested in seeing. One of them was the Late Night with the Devil. Have you seen the previews for this?
I have not, but it sounds up my alley.
Well, this is kind of the interesting thing. Both movies are set in the 70s, and I'll kind of get back to the one we saw because we weren't actually able to see Late Night with the Devil, but Late Night with the Devil, the idea is 1977, late night, overnight talk show on the television. They bring in this young lady who is possessed by the devil, and things go awry from there. Unfortunately, he's not playing that close to me. It's nowhere real convenient, so no big deal. I'll see that eventually. I'm still eager to see that. The one that surprised us was, are you, and I guess I shouldn't even ask because we talked a little bit before we started recording, but I know you're familiar with The Omen. Classic horror film.
The 76. That's one of my favorite horror movies. It's just,
and I've only seen it a couple times, but talking about experience, the last time I saw it was at the drive-in theater.
Oh, that would have been fun. Yeah.
It was part of a double feature. I forget what the first film was, but it was completely unrelated. But the drive-in was doing a cool thing where they shows a current film and then you could stick around and watch an older movie, and it worked out really. Yeah, it was just a nice thing. But there is a prequel to the 1970, what was it, 74
76. Yep.
76.
76,
Okay.
Yep.
So it takes place in the early 70s. And it's basically the story. Basically, it's this whole story of how the boy gets there. Now, did enjoy it. And I'll tell you what. There's any time, being raised in the Catholic Church, I mean, there's a lot of religious imagery that is genuinely unsettling. Like, if you really look at, like, a crucifix, it's pretty gory.
Right. It is. Yeah. No, and that's in, and I'd say in like, that is kind of part of it. Is worth pointing out when we're talking in conjunction with horror films. It lends itself.
Now, I'm not going to go too deep into anything because I know some people don't like that. But come on, I don't buy the spoiler thing. It is a brand new film. We saw it the day it came out. But are you really not going to go see it? But either way, I'm not going to disclose anything. I'm going to say that the pre-Vatican II. You're set in Rome. You have all the clergy attire. You have these old buildings. I mean, everything's dark.
Yeah.
And even the light, I felt like they used a lot of like green and orange filters, and it gave everybody kind of a decayed kind of look. It was unsettling, but there's that. There's the supernatural element. There was a good deal of medical. And the medical stuff really is that bothers me.
It's a different time.
I wouldn't say it's not about the 70s. It's just about medical
stuff in general.
Horror stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Like No, I get that. Yeah.
I'm not a super squeamish person, but that is like I do recoil a little bit at that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, you remember Fire in the Sky?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the needle comes down to the eye.
Yeah, that's hard to watch. Yeah, it's not great. Don't love that part. Yeah.
No. But one of the things that I did find interesting, and again, without getting into detail, the storyline kind of does set itself up around, the Catholic Church at this time. They're experiencing a loss of people. Okay. And so it's set up around, well, we kind of need this evil because it pulls people in to the church and they wrap themselves around it for protection. So it does kind of go, and I mean, you can even see it in the trailer. It says, well, if you're losing people, you have to they're not afraid of, you have to give them something to be afraid of. And so basically they are this faction of people within the church in Rome are responsible for the coming about of Damien, and how they do that is something to be watched. But basically the movie, I thought it did a pretty good job of leading up to the events
because it grows right
become up. The omen that we've known now for 40 some years.
Right. And I would like to see it because Ralph Ineson's one of the leads, right?
I'll trust you on that. I'm not super familiar with many actors.
I just saw he's the actor from the biggest thing is The Witch. He was the father in The Witch. He was the voice in the Green Knight. He was in Buster Scruggs. He was in A Field in England. He's just a fantastic actor. But I remember seeing his name associated with the film, so I assume he's one of the leads because he's such a good actor.
Maybe so. Is he an Irish guy?
No, he's definitely English.
Okay.
But he could have. He's played Irish actors.
There is a priest, an excommunicated priest, and a real low voice.
Yeah.
Oh, really phenomenal voice.
Ralph Ineson, as an excommunicated priest.
I'm guessing this is the guy.
I'm in. Yeah, Ralph Ineson is an excommunicated priest. That's all you need to tell me. I'm watching it. Yeah.
I can't confirm that that's the character he plays,
sure it is.
But
yeah,
real deep, great voice.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's a great actor.
So it's again, I'm glad that we're at a point where they kind of give you warning that there's going to be a jump scare, because I've said this before. I'm not super thrilled about the jump scare. Yeah. I curl my tongue up and touch the roof of my mouth because I'm so afraid I'm going to bite it off.
Right, just to be safe. Yeah.
Yeah, but the things I like is it is atmospheric. Right? It doesn't, it's atmospheric. It plays with a lot of ancient things. And actually, my wife said something to the fact that she liked that. Yeah, it's a period piece, but it's not crazy. It's, it's 40, 50 some years ago.
Right.
But because of the church and this ancient institution,
Right.
it really it can play with a lot of that imagery. So yeah, I thought it was an all right.
Yeah.
Thought it was all right.
No, I think that's high praise, and I think that lines up well with the '76 version, because I think what that movie did so well was it captured the liminality of that time culturally for the church, like what you're saying. And what it did with the locations is it made places that were supposed to be safe feel unsafe.
That's an interesting statement. Yeah.
Yeah. And so and you do that by, again, not only with the jump scares nowadays, like you're saying, but previously it was done with holding on shots for a little too long, using angles that were a little off kilter, things that unless you're real into film, you probably don't even notice, but it helps set that vibe. So that's really cool. I'm glad to hear that about that film. I'm definitely going to try and watch it now.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep looking out for Late Night with the Devil. This is not normally, like, I do like a lot of spooky things, but it's normally like ghost stuff. Both of these movies are kind of hitting upon the same drum. It's, the devil and all of that. So it's kind of interesting. It's not my normal bread and butter as far as spooky movies go. But yeah, I think it's worth my time, or worth your time to see. Would I see it again? Probably not.
Yeah.
But no, it was good. It was good. I'll tell you what the most unsettling thing is, though. Have you ever gone to the movies at like 1 p.m?
Yeah, I think I know what you're gonna say.
And then you walk out and it's still sunny out?
I don't like that. Yeah.
It is kind of weird. I feel like the movie's done. I should go to bed.
Right. Yeah. It's, yeah. Well, because it's weird. It's funny. I don't like going in when it's light and it being light afterwards. I also don't like going in when it's light and coming out when it's dark. I think you need to go, for some reason.
Go in dark, come out dark.
Right. Yeah. Like it's a nighttime thing.
It's a perfect crime.
Yeah.
Well, and you know what? That might be. I never thought about this, but I realized growing up, went to the movies a lot more in autumn and winter.
Yeah, for sure.
And part of that's because there's just fewer outside things to do.
Right.
But,
Right, yeah, it gets dark at 5 o'clock, so you sit around for an hour or two and then realize you're bored, but there's still a lot of time left.
Right.
You can go hit an 8 o'clock film.
Well, and even if you had gone to the 1:55 showing that we did, by the time we were out, it would have been dusk. Right? So, but no, that was that. So, I know I had brought up Spring-Heeled Jack before, and we've kind of been hitting on, with the Texas Servant Girl Annihilator, just these strange crimes, and I'm trying to remember the Devil's Footprints.
Yes, the Devil in Devonshire. Yeah, that was fun.
That
40
was fun.
Yeah, and I think that some of it falls into the whole Fortean camp. Obviously, the Texas Annihilator stuff is more in the true crime side.
Right, but there's still so much mystery.
It's so weird. Well, yeah, there's so much mystery. It's just so weird. That's the best word for it. It's just this weird stuff where you're like the Occam's razor isn't satisfactory a lot of times.
And I'll say this, as far as the razor cuts, the Devil's Footprints and the River Otter's explanation made so much sense. It was so clean, so understandable. It seemed like, this checks a lot of boxes.
Right.
It's a perfect explanation. Well, not all of them. I think it checked all of them. But the Grafton Monster, which you recently brought to my attention, and the explanation that the newspapers provided there, I still can't let go of. And in fact, I've been talking to people in my just regular daily life about that.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, just the other day, I was providing a professional training.
Yeah.
I'm like 2.5 hours into it, and this woman says, I'm from rural West Virginia, and I said, "Oh, you just mean West Virginia then?"
Right.
And we laughed, and I said, "Well," and then I dropped Grafton, West Virginia is the 20-something most populated place, and it only has about 5,000. I realized, oh my goodness, I should shut up.
Yeah.
You know?
Dude, if I had $1 for every time, yeah. Uh, yeah. I mean, people like us, we have a habit of getting weird when we shouldn't sometimes. And it's yeah, you walk that line to see if someone's cool. Then you're like, you know what? This is yeah.
Well, this lady was cool, and we can all be
Thankfully.
thankful for that.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah, so Spring Heel Jack, and I have to admit, I know I had brought it up to you as a possible avenue, something that we could look into. I know actually very little about it, and what I know just offhand
hmm
can be compressed into basically there's this figure, this
hmm
fiendish figure, a bit tall, jumps pretty high, leaps over gates, got a good vertical, running around mid 19th century England,
hmm
outside, just outside London, as I recall,
Mainly, yes. Yep.
and scaring people. Some people think it's a prank. Later, like 20,
hmm
30 years later, there's stories of this character coming about again.
Yeah.
It seems like a comet of some sort because it seems like every generation there's
hmm
Spring Hill Jack stories. And much like some local legends to us
hmm
that we've talked about how they evolve, each incarnation of Spring
hmm
Heel Jack seems to be really different than
Right.
what's coming. Like they really build on the
Right.
legend in dramatic ways. So I'm going to hand things over to you to kind of give just talk about this Spring Heel Jack character.
Yeah, so it's interesting with Spring Hill Jack, like you mentioned, it's so all over the place. And like we see that in a lot of things in both the paranormal, but also just in, regular life too, where you have a bucket that is relatively popular and a lot of stuff gets thrown into there because it's like, well, this fits, 2 out of the 6 known criteria. Then so it's like, yeah, let's because you don't know where else to put it. So there's a lot of variance on this, and because this all originally does stem from the early 1800s, 1837, 1838 was when the first kind of flap was that we'll talk about. If you go online, do your own research, there is tons and tons of stuff out there on Spring Heel Jacks. We're just kind of really going to be doing our version of an overview. I do want to give a shout out to a gentleman who did a bunch of research that we were able to find and pulled some stuff from a few sources, but the main one is this gentleman named Mike Dash, who did a really, really great write-up on kind of a concise history of the Spring Heel Jack. We're not going to be reading all of it because it is huge. It's like probably 70 pages. It's enormous. But there's tons of great articles out there. There's tons of great podcasts. The Astonishing Legends podcast did a great quick overview in one of their early episodes. There's books, all kinds of stuff. And Spring Hill Jack in pop culture kind of gets this kind of he sits in kind of this weird place because it is so like almost like goofy with the character. The images you'll see are like this like dastardly villain in just all kinds of different like get-ups, and it's honestly in completely removed from it, you get why people think it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But that being said, these are attacks that are happening in most cases. People are injured, people are certainly traumatized, if not worse in some cases. So I do want to say up front too, as we kind of say that we're going over this on a kind of a high level, like these were attacks, even though
Well, and I'll add
yeah.
to that too. The way papers were written then,
Mm-hmm.
it can maybe overshadow some of what occurred.
Right,
We might be
because
reading into the language, and that language might be
mhm,
softening, or it might be we might be misinterpreting it because
right.
it's not the same.
But let's go ahead and kind of get into this.
Sure.
You have, again, this is in like the west side of London and everything, mainly. You have these weird, like you mentioned, Nick, almost like something popping out, scaring people, sometimes attacking people, and then like leaving quickly. And people are starting to get kind of like scared. One of the first attacks is on this woman named Mary Stevens. This is in October of 1837. A servant named Mary Stevens was returning home on Lavender Hill, While passing through Clapman Common, a creature sprang from a dark alley, tightly wrapped its arms around her, roughly kissed her on the face, and began running its hands up her blouse. When she screamed, the creature bounded from the scene. Several people heard Mary scream and searched for her assailant, but was never found.
Yeah, that's pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
There's nothing fun about that one.
But it seems like that is like the first one in newspapers that's kind of referenced. The reason that was written about so much was because the following day, that same creature appeared to strike again in the same location. This time it sprang out in front of a passing carriage and caused a crash. Witnesses claimed the creature jumped effortlessly over a 9-foot wall in a single hop. The person who was driving that was like severely injured, because we think, oh, a carriage, how fast can it be going? But a carriage run by horses that is going, even 15, 20 miles an hour has no safety equipment. And if those horses stop all of a sudden or crash, that's a pretty violent, that's violent.
Right. And you're not really being held in, and a carriage can tip over. They weigh a lot. Carriage accidents killed and maimed.
Yeah.
And again, think about if you're up high on it. I mean, you might be sitting quite a few feet in the air. You're sitting up above the back of a horse often. If that tips over and you're thrown onto the pavement, like if it's a stone pavement or something, yeah, it can be violent. And of course, you don't have safety glass. So if something breaks the glass, that's all showering down on you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's just, it sounds like you're like, oh, a carriage crash. But think about it. It's intense. So when this happened, the police really started to kind of like get serious about it. When they were investigating at this location, they found two, what they called gouge marks that were 3 inches deep in the roadside, which made them think that the creature or assailant was using some kind of a mechanical mechanism that was propelling them over these walls. And this is where we first get the name Spring-Heeled Jack, because they thought he literally had some sort of mechanical springs in his heels.
Yeah, and I kind of want to just underline that, because when we were talking a little bit before, this is not the first of some mechanical explanations that were proposed. And so I just kind of want to prime people to be kind of on the lookout for those sort of explanations moving forward.
Yeah, thinking about the mechanical element to this, not just the paranormal element or the awful human element.
Although making such a device in order to grow up women in public would be awfully human enough.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like the motivation seems bad enough as it is. Doesn't need to be any worse.
There we go.
Hopping out in front of this horse implies like general mayhem was trying to be. It was just some sort of a disruption, and so as a result, both these awful attacks, you start seeing not saying mobs, but you see vigilantes and you see people getting together and going out looking for Spring-Heeled Jack, kind of putting. I guess they would call it a posse. It's kind of, I think that was a Western term, but maybe that's
definitely not something I would call in England.
Right?
Maybe
yeah,
a firm.
Maybe a firm, or maybe a ballywhoop of, I'm sorry, but yeah, like they're getting folks together and everything, and
the constables.
Yeah. It's just so, but I mean, people are taking it seriously. Like, hey, this woman has been injured and traumatized, and this guy has been injured who was driving driving his carriage down the street. So you start to see sightings all over the place. And this is when they start to get even kind of weirder. The descriptions really vary. Some of them involve kind of costumes and capes, and some involve hats. Some involve masks of different kinds. There's a few of them that describe like a white, like almost what we would nowadays again call like a wetsuit. They called back in the day, it wasn't the seal skin. They had another word for it too that we mentioned last week when talking about the Grafton Monster. But so all these different outfits and different descriptions, the thing that really kind of like ties it all together is the jumping. You see it being called a ghost, a devil. Even in one, they say he turned into a large white bull, like a
A
which is a
bowl?
bull, like
Oh,
Bull. Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah,
thought you
forgive.
said BOWL.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
forgive my Pittsburgh accent there. Those words are basically the same for me. Um, bull, bull. Yeah, they're the same word. Um, but things are kind of crazy, late 1837, early 1838. And then I'm going to read now one of the descriptions that, again, this Mike Dash put together, because I think out of all of them that I could find online of this next kind of major account, I think he does the most eloquent job of putting it all together. So here we go. Old Ford, to the east of London, and the bell on it jangled violently about a quarter to 9 on the evening of 20th of February, 1838, on the east side of London. Inside the cottage, 18-year-old Jane Alsop looked uncertainly at her parents and her sisters. Who could be calling at such a time? It was already dark and chill outside, and there were only a few passerbys in such an isolated spot. The bell rang again, longer this time and louder. So Jane opened the front door and walked a short distance to the gate. Her eyes had not yet adjusted to the dark, but dimly she made out the figure of a man standing in the lane. Although enveloped in a cloak, he appeared angular, and some sort of headgear augmented his considerable height. Approaching him, Jane asked what was the matter. "I am a policeman," the man snapped back. "For God's sake, bring me a light, for we have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane." Jane hurried back to the cottage to fetch a candle. Like every other resident of Old Ford and all the other villages in the outskirts of London, she had heard stories of this mysterious demon who had first been seen in the autumn of the previous year. Jack was said to appear as either a ghost clad in armor or as a baboon, sometimes a bear or a devil, and his hideous appearance and preternaturally agile leaps were rumored to have frightened quite a number of his female victims into fits or worse. Quickly, Jane ran back to the house, returning with a candle for which she handed to the waiting figure. His reaction was not what she expected. Far from thanking her and making off to secure one of the most wanted criminals in England, the man leaned back, threw down his cloak, and holding the lighted candle to his chest, bathed his face in an eerie glow. Jane could not help but scream. The face thus revealed was hideously ugly. Its eyes blazed red as the coals of hell, and as it pinched, tight features were topped by a particular sort of helmet. The body, meanwhile, was encased in a tightly fitting, shining suit, and a strange object resembling a lamp was strapped to the chest. There could be no doubt that far from lending help to a policeman, Jane had been ensnared by the Spring-Heeled Jack himself. She had no time to register more than these initial impressions before Jack attacked. Leaping forward, he vomited balls of blue and white fire towards her face and seized her by the dress and neck, pinning her under one of his arms. With terror mounting, she realized that in place of fingers, he had sharp, long talons, which he was using to tear at her clothes, shoulders, and face. Shrieking with fear, Jane somehow wrenched herself free and ran towards the front door. Jack came after her, catching her on the doorstep, pinning her again, scratching her arms and yanking out clumps of hair. As he did so, Jane's younger sister Mary appeared at the door, but she was too much alarmed at Spring-Heeled Jack's supernatural appearance to render any assistance. And it was left to an older sister, Miss Sarah Harrison, to come to Jane's aid. Somehow, the unfortunate girl was dragged free of Jack's deadly embrace, and the front door slammed in the assailant's face. Even then, Jack did not give up. He banged heavily on the door until the rest of the Alsop family appeared in the upstairs windows and called loudly for police. Then, perhaps persuaded that he could do no more mischief on this night, he vanished back into the darkness from which he had come.
Yeah, so here we start to get, okay, so the initial news thing that you read, not good. Don't misinterpret what I'm going to say next, but a fairly prosaic attack.
Yes.
Now we're getting into this fantastical stuff.
Right.
Vomiting blue balls of fire, talons, preternaturally ugly.
Mm-hmm.
described.
A helmet, an apparatus on his chest. Yeah, it's just.
Right. Well, in some of the images, if you look up the artist
Mm-hmm.
depictions, it looks like an early sketch of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It kind of does.
he's
Yeah.
got the tools, he's got the bat
Yeah.
helmet, the
Yeah.
bat fire vomiter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's getting ridiculous now. No doubt, people will go to some lengths, and there's silly people that are going to create contraptions in order to be able to leap tall buildings. I mean, think about amputees that have those running things.
Yeah, like the yeah.
The spring thing, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's
Not
a
new
technical
technology.
term, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right, exactly. I can imagine a time when somebody would have created something like that. You remember the guy we went to high school with who became a stuntman?
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian, I remember him wearing them spring shoes and doing things out in Vegas with those. And yeah, that was weird. But again, that's not exactly new technology. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone created that or got a hold of that and used it for nefarious purposes. Even if it's just think about our friend Harry who installed a train horn in his truck.
Right.
Did all sorts of dastardly things with that train horn. You would know. You would watch him slowly go to honk on the steering wheel, and it would still scare you to death.
Yep.
But the fire, the fact that it was so hideously ugly, was this just a really ugly tall guy with some contraption of it, or was this that people were scared and it becomes this building and building and building up? Did the person run, jump, and plant his arms on the top of a 9-foot wall and hoist himself up, throwing himself? Like, I used to be able to run and grab to the top rung of a chain link fence, throwing my body over it in one smooth, fluid motion that I would stare in awe at today. But did he run in just feet parallel to the ground over a 9-foot wall? This is where I wonder, like, what are we losing in the language?
Right. And I think with this one, it's interesting because there are parts that are so specific. Like, again, you have 3 people that are able to like corroborate these details, all 3 of these sisters who were able to fight off this attacker successfully, thankfully. I'm sure it was traumatizing for all 3 of them, it sounds like. But
absolutely.
But you have, like you said, you have the helmet, which again could be, let's assume that's a hat, but still it's something that it was weird enough for them to mention that as something that was different. Same with the tightly fitting shiny suit. Like, there's lots of elements here that like were worth them kind of calling out. And then again, the contraption that spews fire. And it's one of those things where it says, blue and white flames. Again, I am not a chemist or a pyrotechnician, but I feel like creating blue and white flames in a homemade pyrotechnic in 1838 on the west side of London probably wasn't easy.
Yeah, so here's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine that it seems self-evident. It's not worth questioning that this was a violent attack. When we're talking about ripping out clumps of hair, I'm assuming like that means clumps of hair and maybe skin as well. Definitely violent. These 3 women are, involved. They are likely being interviewed at the height of their trauma. Right. They're getting statements. It's still very present. I think that, and this is not a slander, but when you're in a state of trauma, everything's even if you have kept the levelest head, this is a crazy thing you've just been through. I don't think. I mean, was the suit shiny? Sure. Did you get hit in the head so hard that you're seeing spots, blue and white spots? Because, like, I've been hit in the head pretty good. Had a few concussions, been knocked out once, and it's. Would you describe the spots that you're seeing, the stars that you're seeing, as like tongues of flame? I could understand that. The bottom line is a statement that you're giving, still at the height of trauma, after a clearly violent thing. I don't know how exact it is because you're in survival mode.
Right. And these folks have like you said, have been through a lot, and
It's a
that's and
surprise too, so it's not
yeah.
like you were able to look at everything for a long time and really study it.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see a few things. I could interpret these some of these statements in a few different ways.
Right, and because like there are other accounts that talk about like like not necessarily. I didn't see any that said blue and white specifically, but talk about flames, talk about the eyes, looking like they're burning and everything. Which again is something you see in paranormal stuff all over the place. Burning red
Yeah,
eyes are
and even
that's
just unattached red eyes that are glowing and
glowing.
following
Yeah,
around.
you have
Yeah,
that with Bigfoot. You have it with all kinds of stuff.
had it with the
Hellhounds
cemetery right
have the
around
cemetery.
us.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that's a common kind of not to say trope, but it's kind of a trope.
I think it's heard of enough that we can call
Right.
it as much.
Right. Of course, no one was caught, kind of thing for this at the time. A few days later, just under half a mile to the north, there was another incident on Turner Street, and a servant answered the door after someone was knocking on it. The person asked to see Mr. Ashworth, who was the owner of the house. As the servant opened the door, sees what he said was Spring-Heeled Jack. Threw off his cloak to reveal the same sinister features and everything, talking about the suit that he had been wearing, and screams at this kid apparently so loud that it like knocked the boy over. The kid obviously screams. I guess Jack figured it was going to wake up the neighbors. I guess I'm not sure what he thought was going to happen, but in this case, bounds off again over some walls. But this time, the kid and the homeowner, Mr. Ashworth, see that the inside of the cloak that he's wearing, there's a large letter W embroidered on the inside. And this kind of goes along with the last case, even though it's just a few days later in the same area. Of you have these very particular details that people are pulling out of these cases that aren't necessarily corroborating previous cases, but they're so specific. It reminds me a lot of, when people talk about certain, like both, I'd say Bigfoot and extraterrestrial encounters, where some of the specifics
Yes.
are so like, I know we've said this before, but like if and maybe this is like our confirmation bias, but it's like if you're going to make something up, why would that be the thing you make up? Maybe that's a false bias that we have that like makes me feel like something is more credible.
Well, it makes me think about when I was talking to you about the Grafton thing, and again, reconciling and making fun of the newspaper statement about it being a cart with boxes on it. And I said, imagine you're in the woods, you saw Bigfoot, and he's blowing on a pinwheel. Would you not notice the pin, like, in the midst of everything? I would think that the pinwheel would stand out. However, we've seen tests on memory specific to eyewitness testimony, and we can see how some things can be missed. So
the invisible gorilla. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's always what comes back to, the damn invisible gorilla. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. I would like to think that something weird like that, and if you're taught to lie, one of the things you're told to do in your training for this is to think of a specific detail like that. Now, I don't think these people are lying by any means.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing to note. But again, as I kind of opened up with, there's a fairly prosaic story, and then it adds. It's like the old woman who swallowed a fly. It just keeps adding things to it that then seem to remain attached to this figure.
Yes.
And by the time we get some of these later reports, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the initial. Now, if you're going like, oh, this is somebody who's creating a mechanical thing, well, by the time he's all done, a pretty aged person to be.
You'd think. Well, and that's the interesting.
Very committed, though.
Very committed, yeah. And so at the time, before we get to the 1877 stories, at the time, there were people who were obviously questioned about this. So there were people who, different community members called out saying like, hey, that person over there is, a problem, kind of thing. And you had police questioning all kinds of folks. There was some theories that these were just kind of people who were like out, not to say to do hoaxes, but like groups of men or friends or whatever that were specifically going out on like dares trying to scare people and things like that. Like, I'm sure that happens, but the reactions that people have don't seem to line up with that in most cases because of all the weird details that people are able to bring to these cases and everything. What do you think, Nick, about the idea of this just being a series of possibly unconnected events that are just kind of put into a bucket because of hysteria? Again, I don't like using the word hysteria. Put into the same bucket based off of like a cultural praise, okay. Almost.
Yeah. People are scared.
Yeah, scared. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's if you want to make hysteria seem like a negative thing. I mean, the bottom line is, if somebody's going out and ripping hair out of some women and attacking, I don't think it's inappropriate to be a bit hysterical, to be a bit concerned, like, oh, this person hasn't been apprehended. I'm a potential. I understand where that trepidation comes from. I don't think that's necessarily a slight upon anybody to say that seems a wholly reasonable thing to be scared of.
Right. Well, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think a few of these may be connected. I wonder how language has affected how we interpret these, how witnesses, when there are more than one witness, how the what they're going through influences how they explain, how they remember things. I've gone back and forth. We talk a lot about how in media portrayals, and these days, when there's suspicion that there's a serial killer, they try to downplay that because they don't want to stoke hysteria.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel like I could make a justification for, well, no, we want to put this on the back of one potential because then we don't have many things to fear. We don't have to fear everyone. We have to be concerned with this one character.
Right.
And I don't know if one of those attitudes was more prevalent during this time period than others. But
right.
Yeah, but I definitely think that just because of the span of time, there's very clearly some of these may be connected, but I highly doubt that they are all connected. And I don't know by what thread people are trying to connect them all as a singular thing.
We mentioned like the break, like, because again, there's more that happens in this flap, as we'll call it, to use a paranormal term. At this time, there's lots of anecdotes out there like this. Then there does appear to be a bit of a lull for the better part of 30 years to 1877, 40 years. Can't do math. You see a few pop back up, specifically around a barracks in Shuri, which we were talking about earlier.
Can I pause real quick and
just
put in, and here's one of my justifications for saying I don't believe these are all connected, because the fact of the matter is, if this were one person, why would they have been dormant for so long?
Right.
Were they just somewhere else and nobody's connected to the thread yet? Were they just very lucky for a long period of time and getting away with it scot-free?
Right.
I just don't buy that.
Yeah, it doesn't pass the eye test to me either, for those exact same reasons. So there was this barracks, and again, this is like a military barracks. This is, where there was about 10,000 troops stationed. So not like a small little outpost. Like
that's pretty consequential.
Yeah, like it was it's like not a joke kind of thing. And this is again in in 1877. So what was happening was guards started to see what they called Spring-Heeled Jack showing up around the sentries and starting to like torment them and mess with them and everything on like the outskirts of this barracks. On more than one occasion, he would appear specifically at these sentry boxes, gain entry, and then just touch the face of a soldier, startling them, obviously, scaring the heck out of them. And then with his, incredible jumping ability and agility, get out of there before anyone could apprehend him. On many occasions, being shot and at least twice, sentries were very sure that they hit their target. And this happened a number of times. But, of course, if he was ever hit, we don't have a body. Didn't show any signs of slowing down from his jumping and his agility and everything.
Do you think that is a more credible thing that trained soldiers, presumably trained soldiers, are firing?
So I would think that in the at this point, 1877, like muskets were never like great by our standards of like accuracy. But
that's not what they're using then. This isn't a black powder thing.
1877 in England, they could have been using cartridges.
I'm assuming they were.
So let's say that it would still be black powder. It wouldn't have been smokeless yet. But it could have been smokeless.
It seems to me like, because this is the era out here in America, of course, the 6-shooter.
Yeah, we have the sharps and we have all that stuff. Hold on,
right.
1877.
So I feel
English.
Like in the wake of the American Civil War, gun manufacturing goes through a sea change. No, and while you're looking up,
they use Martinettis. Yeah. Okay, so that's which was a cartridge rifle. So
okay. So again, I would say that
they're trained sentry soldiers. They should be able to hit stuff.
Only should they be able to hit stuff, but if you have a cartridge rifle, it's a lot easier to go and fire it.
Right.
Now, if you're a sentry, you should probably already have your gun loaded up just in case in any action. But if you're firing multiple times, it takes a minute.
Right. It does.
You got to really consider what you're doing, and it's a pain. Like, we've gone black powder hunting before, and it's like you need to have the perfect shot because it's going to be hard to get a second one.
Right, exactly. So, like, the fact that, like, again, British soldiers at this time, like, in any army at any time, you don't just go firing at stuff for no reason. That's not, like, a funny thing to do. So, like, I'm going to trust that, like, they are held to those same standards.
I would hope to, especially since it's not like they're on foreign soil. They're in a domestic situation. You do not... I don't think in any era you would want to give any sort of indication that your soldiers were untrained and just going willy-nilly.
Right, yeah, agreed. So then a few months after this Aldershot issue, he appears again in the same town. This time, he shows up in his, what they call his quintessential bizarre sheepskin costume. I don't know if that means he's like hairy sheepskin. Like
or one of the coats. Like I used to have an awesome sheepskin coat, and I missed that.
Right, so maybe that's what it was. But so either way, it's a sheepskin, I guess a leather kind of thing. But he shows up and leaps 20 feet over an ancient Roman monument called the Newport Arch, which I was unfamiliar with. But in this article, it talks about hopping over the Newport Arch, and I'm like thinking like not like the St. Louis Arch, but like.
Yeah.
This Newport Arch, 21 and a half feet above the Roman level, it says.
Above the Roman level?
The Roman level, which is 8 feet deep now. So, we're talking like a 14-foot arch. It's a 14-foot arch. I'm not saying that's not impressive, but I'm also not saying that's the most impressive feat we've heard of when it comes to jumping.
No, I'm having a hard time, even with what contraption they're making that leap.
Right, exactly. In this little altercation, a few people took shots at him and apparently hit him, but again, impervious to bullets. He then, on top of the arch, made fun of the town folks, taunting them before making his escape.
So it sounds like making fun. Okay. Again, a bizarre story. How many different... I mean, it seems like there must have been quite a few witnesses to that. Where was this published initially? Is this in like Puck?
New. Let me see if I can find. Because again, this Mike Dash guy, boy, does he have some Sheldrake's Aldershot and Sandhurst Military Gazette, April 21st, 1877.
Yeah, I don't know how credible of sources these are because
right, it's just like yeah, it's just it doesn't. This is where I think the time difference is really hard. So I was reading Game News earlier, which I read every month when it shows up, and there's little sections called Game Notes, which are basically like little like jokes from hunting from wardens and stuff, and like about people fishing or deer or stuff. If 100 years from now someone grabs that and goes, "Oh well, this is a published credible source," it's like, yeah, it is, but like that might have been a Peanuts cartoon. Like, we don't know.
Well, I mean, we've talked about the Jersey Devil before,
right.
And just how out of hand that's gotten.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm curious, what's your impression?
I mean, like, I love the idea of. Well, I'll say I love the idea. That's a bad way of putting it. I think.
Wait, I'm sorry. You don't love the idea of.
Well, I think I think the idea of someone creating this contraption and having a fire-breathing suit and like all this stuff at that time, not even taking into account the gap, is just like kind of unrealistic, from that standpoint. Like, I don't think this is like a steampunk thing. I don't think that's what it is.
No, they that wouldn't need to be. They were contemporary.
They were contemporary. Yeah, they were. Yeah, it was just steam.
Would have and copper, brass. And teeth and,
just cogs everywhere. Yeah. So I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think the paranormal element makes a ton of sense either in this case. If anything, it sounds more like Alien stuff, where it's because it's so almost like unhinged in a lot of ways and so different. But I think probably what's happening is there's a bunch of awful people trying to scare people and attack people, and they're kind of getting put into the same bucket, like I kind of said at the start here. That's probably what's happening, but I'm not sure what that says about the culture of the time or how we have like kind of kept this this story going for so long, because this is a pretty popular Fortean story. Like,
I was going to say
out there,
that's what surprises me. I do think there were quite a few attacks, especially that I keep going back to the hair pulling thing because that's just so aggressive. That bullets, he was impervious to bullets. Again, he was fought off by a few women. They were, able at some loss to get away. So I'm pretty sure bullets could have stopped. I think that was a very real thing, and I think a lot of the later stories are whole cloth creations for the fun of it. Mm-hmm. That's just the impression I get.
And again,
it's a character.
Yeah, it's a character, and
they're still making Sherlock Holmes stories, right?
Right.
The good character is hard to let go. I remember being a kid, I was a Marvel Comics person, did a lot of X-Men, Wolverine, Spider-Man. But those characters, many of them had been around since the early mid-1960s. And I always grappled with that. Like, how do they keep... I felt like they should age. I don't feel like they should just always kind of be, and we just accept that, Peter Parker's being in his mid-20s, early 30s for, decades now. That always bothered me, but it's hard to create a new character that can have staying power. And how long do you have to cycle till you have to cycle out? Is it like the NHL? Like, maybe you get 20 years, and if you get 20 years in the NHL, like, you're a salty tar.
You're a Hall of Famer at that point, probably.
Probably. And, if you're playing the Ron Francis game here, but
it's wild because, like, again, this story, for how popular it's been and everything, I really wonder how it'll be interpreted like in the future, because like we read these stories and we go, oh, these are like awful attacks, and we see like this juxtaposition between how awful these attacks are with how seemingly like cartoonishly goofy it is to have him showing up and like running his hand over guards and then just like skedaddling,
boingy.
Yeah, it's almost it just. And then you see like the contemporary like drawings and stuff and caricatures, and it's just like, this doesn't match up with how, because people were getting hurt, For us, that seems like such an obvious juxtaposition that just like doesn't it's hard to it's hard to get past that. And so I wonder how it'll be seen in 100 years from now when people are looking back on this case, because if we've learned one thing, it's gonna still be around probably.
Yes.